video is going to be a product review of a Athearn SD45 with sound. This was in the Ready-to-Roll line, and this is the first engine I've bought in the Ready-to-Roll line that already has factory sound in it. I've got a bunch of these engines already without sound, and I find they're very nicely detailed and they run well. Certainly in this line, Athearn has really stepped up the detail over the last several years in this line engine. It's a great price point, lots of details on it, and they run well. And now they're including factory soundboard in it, so those of you who want sound but don't want to actually have to install it yourself are going to have a great option out there. So with this one, I wanted to check it out, look at how it's, the details on it, see how it sounds. And of course, we'll look at the performance of the engine, check out the details on it, talk about the prototype and where the model is the same, or if there's any discrepancies or differences between the model and the prototype SD45. And then we will actually go ahead and pop the shell off this one and look at the board and how the speaker is set up inside the engine. So like I said, this is the first one of these I've got, so I thought you might want to see the internal components of the engine and how it's set up. Alright, so with that, let's go ahead and check out the details on this Athearn SD45.
The engine comes well protected in Athearn's standard ready-to-roll box. There's a small package of additional detail parts. These are to detail out the fuel tank and the trucks if you choose to do so. And as we finish unboxing the engine here, for those unfamiliar with this paint scheme for Southern Pacific, this is called the Kodachrome paint scheme. You'll see these for Southern Pacific and Santa Fe. This was the paint scheme that was developed in the mid-'80s when the two railroads were going to merge to form the Southern Pacific and Santa Fe Railway. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your viewpoint, that merger was denied by the Interstate Commerce Commission in 1986. However, by that time, both railroads had already painted a good number of their engines into this paint scheme. The Southern Pacific engines having SP painted on them, but not the SF. The SF was going to be added later on after the merger was finalized. But since the merger was never finalized, that part was never painted on, and these engines continued to roam the system for several years in this paint scheme before some of them were either sold, still in this paint scheme, and the other ones were repainted eventually. This engine is well detailed. The handrails are actually pretty straight and nicely looking. They're a little bit fine and delicate, so you have to be careful with them. This one coming straight out of the box did have a couple problems with the handrails, as you can see here. The handrails were not damaged at all or anything, but they had popped out of the location where they were supposed to be here on the nose, and then also on the back steps in one area. They all popped back in place just fine, and like I said, we're not damaged at all or anything. So, but it'd be nice if you didn't have to do that when you first take an engine out of the box. You got to go in and fix a couple things. But other than that, I did not note any problems with the assembly of this. No real big globs of glue. The paint was nice and crisp. The yellow bonnet portion of the engine is pretty crisp. There's a little bit of fuzziness along the sill and where it's painted. You can see where the yellow and red transition together. It's not quite as crisp as it could be. The engine does not come with any crew figures in the cab, which is sort of fine by my book. But what I don't like is the fact that the way they've got the wires routed is they're very visible through the side of the cab. And so I'm going to have to figure out how to reroute those wires a little bit so that they're not as noticeable when you're looking at the side of the engine. You can also see the paint around the number boards is not super crisp. It's sort of a jagged edge there. It would have been nice if that could have been a real nice sharp edge. The horn is applied above the cab on this unit and is a Nathan P3 horn. It's very nicely detailed. And the plow on this engine is real nice. It's got the nice big Southern Pacific appearance to the plow, although we're going to talk a little bit about the plow later on. And here you can see again the fuzziness between the yellow bonnet on the paint scheme between the yellow and red. And then the handrails has got a little bit of a waviness to them, which is not great. I did want to go ahead and point out, you can see here the red extends into the radiators on the engine. That actually is correct. Usually on the engines, after they've been running a little bit, you can't see that because they're covered in soot, but that actually is how they were painted from the factory. Moving back to the cab, there is a noticeable seam along the top of the cab as well that shouldn't be there, and this would be kind of a pain actually to sand down and get rid of because you'd have to repaint the top of the cab after doing so. And here's the rear of the locomotive, and this engine does have SP's lighting package on both the nose and the rear, and so that's kind of nice to have. The trucks look really nice. They're not completely detailed. You have to apply the brake cylinders yourselves to them. They do look nice and crisp and give the appearance of being a nice heavy piece of metal as opposed to molded plastic. All right, now that we've looked at the details on the engine, let's go ahead and listen to how it sounds. This engine does not have a startup sequence, and so when you apply power to it, it just comes on. It does not go through a startup sequence. And so we'll listen to that here. And really, that's it when the engine is stationary. This engine really, literally does not have a lot of the bells and whistles that come with some of the other sound decoders. It doesn't have radio chatter and freight station sounds and freight yard sounds and things. But, frankly, for me personally, I think that's fine because all the engines I have that come with that stuff, other than maybe once or twice seeing if they work or just kind of seeing what it is, I never really use that stuff. But now let's see how this engine sounds when it is on the move. Now this engine, the board, and it does come with multiple air horns that you can select. The default is a Leslie RS3L, but that's not the air horn you should have for this particular road number of this engine. You actually should have a Nathan P3, and so here's the differences in how the two sound, but you can switch it to the correct one. I do want to go ahead and point out that the engine does have a nice gyro light programmed, which is the light above the cab and that flashing pattern. It doesn't quite have the oscillation pattern down that the gyro light should have, but it's a pretty good representation of how it should look. And it's factory programmed that way, so you don't have to mess with it. One thing to note is the emergency light that's part of the SP lighting package. You can see there's the red lens on the nose. Does not work. That's just a dummy lens. There's no light bulb behind it. It doesn't have wires going to it or anything. So if you wanted to actually have that one working plus the one on the rear of the engine working, you'd have to do that yourself. So now that we've listened to how the engine sounds, let's look at how it performs. Straight out of the box, the engine performs real well. It very slight jerkiness to it at speed step 1, but it is pretty smooth, and it'll crawl forward at a very nice 2.2 scale miles per hour. And for those times when you want your engine to go flying around the layout, it'll top out at about 80 scale miles an hour for you. I did have one performance issue with this engine, though, and that has to do, earlier I talked about having a real big Southern Pacific style plow on it. The plow is actually too low on this engine. I'm not sure if that's actually how it is assembled or if just how it was angled on and tilted down too low. But it would catch, going through some of my switches, it would catch on the guardrails that are on the switches, so much so that it actually cut a notch in the plow here. Once it was sort of adjusted to where it would clear on that, it would tracked out really nicely. It went through all my ladder tracks real good, would go forwards, backwards through the double crossover. A little bit of jerkiness going through. I'm not sure if the flanges were hitting on something or catching on something, but you can see there's just a little bit of wobble to the engine as it goes through the double crossover here. But all in all, it performed really well and tracked out nicely. On my layout, the engine would pull 31 cars on level track, and that was going through a 180-degree curve. And then going up a 2% grade, it could go ahead and pull 11 cars all the way up the grade and make it. If you put 12 cars on, then it would stall out on the hill, which is what it's going to do here. And here's an engine from one of the earlier runs of Athearn's SD45s. This one almost stalls out as well with that 12th car, but then it ends up having just enough weight and makes it up and continues going. So it's a little bit more pulling power, but not much. So now that we've looked at the exterior of the engine and how it performs, let's go ahead and look at the interior, check out that new decoder and speaker and see how it's installed. With this engine, it comes apart the way most Athearn ones do anymore. The shell is sort of held on by the coupler pockets in the couplers, so you just remove the couplers, and then that releases the shell from the body of the engine. All right, so let's carefully just slide this up and off and check out the decoder. I'll show you both sides of the decoder here. We'll flip the engine around, and here's the other side, and let me show you a couple close-ups of the decoder and the speaker. One item to note is that even though this decoder is built by Soundtraxx for Athearn, this is not a Tsunami decoder, even though it does have some of the similar features on it. It actually is a different model decoder from Soundtraxx. And so here you can see the speaker and its enclosure. They're a relatively small speaker, which is why you can't get any of those deep bass sounds out of it, which is sort of the same for all this onboard HO sound stuff. And also one of the reasons it probably has slightly less pulling power, because this used to be a solid weight in the previous runs of the Athearn SD45s and similar locomotives. But now that that weight is hollowed out and has a speaker in there, you've got a little bit less weight on the rear truck, and so that probably accounts for the slightly less pulling power of the engine. All right, so now that we've discussed all of the model features of the engine, now let's go ahead and talk about its accuracy to the prototype, and specifically 5760 and the other SD45s that were painted in the Kodachrome paint scheme. This engine was originally built for the Southern Pacific in February 1969 and was originally Southern Pacific 8998 before being renumbered to 7560. As part of the anticipated merger between the Santa Fe and Southern Pacific in the mid-'80s, it was repainted into the Kodachrome paint scheme and remained in that paint scheme until about 1990, when it was repainted back into the gray bloody nose paint scheme of the Southern Pacific. And while 7560 did not wear this Kodachrome paint scheme for very long, many of these engines did. Several of the Southern Pacific SD45s continued to wear that until after they were sold off, including some of them that went to Montana Rail Link and ran as Montana Rail Link engines, still in the Kodachrome paint scheme up until they were repainted by MRL. And 7560 was one of 17 Southern Pacific SD45Rs that were actually painted in the Kodachrome paint scheme. All the Kodachrome engines actually were not SD45s anymore, according to Southern Pacific. They had been upgraded internally, and so they were classified by the SP as SD45Rs. All of their straight SD45s, none of them ever were painted in the Kodachrome paint scheme. All in all, I think 7560 is a good representation of a Southern Pacific SD45R that ran in the mid-'80s to late '80s in this paint scheme. Some of the other ones, like I said, ran much later than that in this paint scheme. And if you like the sound, okay. If some people I know don't, because the speaker's so small, again, you just can't get those bass sounds to where it doesn't really sound like an actual locomotive. But if you're looking to get into HO sound, this is actually a great price point to go ahead and get your start and see if you like it. I do want to go ahead and say thanks to my good friend Frank Keller for allowing me to use a couple of his SD45 Kodachrome shots in this video. And so that is going to wrap things up for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, keep running your trains and keep enjoying them. Thanks for watching.